We have always recognized Ukraine's border as part of our agreements after the collapse of the USSR. But I draw your attention, it means that in the Declaration of Independence of Ukraine, Russia supported this. It is a neutral state. But then also on that basis, we recognized the borders. But later, as you know, the Ukrainian leadership amended the Basic Law and announced its desire to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And this is not what we agreed. This is first of all. Secondly, we never and nowhere support any coup. We do not support it in Ukraine either. We understand and support the people who did not agree with this coup, and we recognize their right to defend their interests. The Secretary-General listened to all this, nodded silently, said, well, yes, well, good, but still you attacked Ukraine. I'm not joking. It's word for word, but there's no rational answer. Where's the mistake in the chain? What did I say wrong? Where did we violate international law and statutes? There are no such violations anywhere. And if we have, then the border of Ukraine should be drawn in accordance with the sovereign decisions of people who live on certain territories, which we call our historical territories. Everything depends on the dynamics of the events that are taking place. If there is no neutrality, it is hard to imagine any good neighborly relations between Russia and Ukraine. Why? Because it means that Ukraine will be constantly used as a tool in foreign hands, and to the detriment of the interests of the Russian Federation. Thus, the basic conditions for the normalization of relations will not be created, and the situation will develop according to an unpredictable scenario. We would very much like to avoid this. On the contrary, we are determined to create the conditions for a long-term settlement and for Ukraine to become an independent sovereign state, rather than being a tool in the hands of third countries and used in their interests. What is happening on the front lines, say, in the Kursk region? They entered this region, and their losses are enormous. In 3 months, the losses are more than the Kiev regime lost last year, more than 30,000 people. Well, they have lost fewer tanks now, about 200, and last year they lost about 240. They just have fewer tanks in general, so there are fewer losses here, they use less. And why are they sitting there, suffering such losses? Because the orders from overseas are to hold on at all costs, at least until the elections, to show that the efforts of the Democratic Party in the Kiev direction were not in vain. Now in many directions, in the Kupiansk direction, I do not know whether the military said it or not, there are 2 centers of blockage there. In one, Ukrainian troops are surrounded and pressed against the reservoir. A group of about 10,000 soldiers is blocked. The other is near Kupiansk. There are about 5,000 soldiers. They are trying to put pontoon crossings in order to partially break out at least. But our artillery instantly destroys them. Well, 2 directions in our area of responsibility of the center group of forces. There will probably be a third soon. The Ukrainian military sees everything, but the decision to fight is made at the political level. We are ready for peace talks, but not based on Kiev's wishes, the name of which changes from month to month, but rather based on Istanbul agreements and today's realities. Only the ceasefire should not be for half an hour and not for half a year so that shells can be brought to them, but to create conditions for the restoration of future cooperative relations in the interests of the 2 peoples, which are undoubtedly fraternal, no matter how much the rhetoric is complicated by today's tragic events in the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. We certainly condemn any manifestation of terrorism. The attack on Israel on October 7th is a manifestation of it. But, of course, the response must be proportionate. You know, we must now strive to minimize the suffering of the Palestinian people. We have to stop the fighting there immediately. Sure that both Israel and Palestine, in this case Hamas, agree on this. We have to look for ways to find mutually acceptable solutions. Are there any? A question: is it possible? I believe that yes, it is possible, as strange as it may seem. We even have our own thoughts on this. We are even trying to talk to all the participants in this conflict, trying to find what might be acceptable to all. And on the whole, there may be light at the end of the tunnel. I try not to spoil anything, only to improve everything, but today's conditions are very peculiar. They put an imprint on everything, including our relations. I also had good relations with French President Emmanuel Macron. Were they bad? I also talked to German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, but at some point they decided they didn't need it. Well, if they don't need it, let it be. I'm telling you, I also had normal relations with Republican Party candidate Donald Trump. I don't know if he wants to talk to me now or not. I had normal relations with US President Joe Biden as well. We met with him in Switzerland, we chatted, we talked on the phone, we called each other, we joked, we laughed. There is no Russian gas in Germany now, and the consequences are severe. Not only because of that, but including that. Now we have yet to see anything that could replace it all. I am talking to our experts, and now I will just repeat what they said. But I don't want to offend anyone, God forbid, as it doesn't sound good. I ask my colleagues, the experts, what is lacking in Europe now? The answer is that they lack brains. Not because they are stupid, no, but because economic decisions are made by politicians who have nothing to do with the economy. It's not a healthy reaction. Every word triggers a stream of consciousness. The current and newly elected president, Donald Trump, was accused of having ties with Russia. Do you remember? Then they held congressional hearings, created a commission to investigate his ties to Russia. There was nothing. There was nothing. Nothing was proven. Nothing. And yet they used imaginary ties to Russia with unimaginable energy that could have been put to better use until the last moment. That's nonsense. I would not like Russia to return to the path it followed until 2022, as I said in my speech. It was a path that involved covert, veiled intervention against our country, aimed at subjugating it to the interests of some other countries that thought they had the right to do so. Russia cannot exist in a subordinate or semi-subordinate condition. It seems to me that our people, the simplest people, ordinary citizens, have realized it. They have realized what our geopolitical opponents are trying to do to us. During our presidential election campaign, I remember especially there was no time to follow everything. But I remember watching on TV how a correspondent of some kind, a foreign correspondent by the way, but I don't remember which one, approached a man in Belgorod on the street. You can probably find this episode in the archives. He asked, "Where are you going?" He said he was going to the polling station. But that's dangerous. Drones could fly in, you could get hurt. Why are you going? Why aren't you afraid? The reply was very short. It was already a middle-aged man. He turned to him, looked so stern and said, "I am Russian." Then he walked on. Because today's events have led to the highest consolidation of Russian society, and to an understanding of what sovereignty means for our country. This is one of the key and vital foundations of Russia's development and its existence in the future. We did not seek to abandon the dollar and do not seek to do so. The political and financial authorities of the United States or Europe do it themselves when they refuse to settle accounts in euros. The euro has not yet established itself as a world currency, and they are already restricting it with their own hands. This is nonsense. We are denied simply to use the dollar as an instrument of payment. Well, let it be. In my opinion, this is a terrible stupidity on the part of the US financial authorities, because this dollar holds all the power of the United States today. They are cutting it off with their own hands. It would seem to me that whatever was going on, the dollar is like a sacred cow, it could not be touched. With their own hands they cut the horns off this cow, they don't wash its udder. And on the contrary, they exploit it for nothing. What is this? It's their own fault. As for what we saw at the opening of the Olympics, I honestly didn't even watch it at first. Then I was told that something was going on, and I watched it. I don't know what the organizers were counting on, why they did it, why the IOC missed it. It was certainly offensive to millions of believers, Christians. Why is it necessary to offend anyone? Our cooperation and friendship with China is not against anyone. Our relations with China are not directed against third countries, including the United States. Our relations with China are aimed at creating conditions for the development of our countries and creating the necessary conditions for the security of our peoples. Russia is not uniting with anyone against anyone. This seems all the more unrealistic with regard to China, with which we have achieved, as I have already said, an unprecedentedly high level of mutual trust, cooperation, and friendship. Of course, we are on China's side. Firstly, because of what I said above. We do not believe that China is pursuing an aggressive policy in the region. A lot of things revolve around Taiwan. Everybody formally recognizes Taiwan is part of China. But what's the reality? In practice, they act in a completely different direction, provoking the situation in the direction of aggravation. Why? Isn't it for the same reason they provoked the Ukrainian crisis? To create a crisis in Asia, and then to say to everyone else, guys, come closer to me, because you can't do it without me. Maybe that kind of logic works there in Asia too. So we do support China, and because we think it has an absolutely balanced policy. Besides, it is our ally. The US conducted endless exercises there. Eventually, China and we also began to conduct drills. But these exercises are not a threat to anyone. They aim to ensure our security. We believe that this is the right tool to stabilize the situation not only in Asia, but in the whole world. The ball is in the United States court, because we have not damaged relations with them. We have not imposed any restrictions or sanctions against them. We do not contribute to any armed conflict in the territories close to them. We have never endeavored to do so, and in practice have never, I would like to emphasize, allowed ourselves to do so. It is not clear why the United States allows itself to do so. I hope that they too will eventually come to realize that it is better not to do this if we do not want any global conflicts. As for the situation in East Asia as a whole, is China creating blocks there? It is the United States creating a block. One block, second, third. Now NATO is formally getting involved there. Nothing good happens when closed military political blocs are created under the explicit leadership of one major country. Japan imposed sanctions against us. It also put Russia on the list of threats, somewhere in some third or fourth place. What threat? What do we threaten Japan with? And they also imposed sanctions. What did we do to you? Why did you do it? Because you got an order from Washington? But somehow you could have told them, we'll think about it, without offending your partner, your ally. You had to follow orders without question. Why did you do that? I don't understand. Everything that was stipulated in the treaty between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Soviet Union is simply reproduced in the new treaty with some new nuances. Yes, of course, it is aimed at ensuring security in the region and our mutual security. Journalist, Russian. Are we going to conduct drills with them? Vladimir Putin, Russian president, Russian. Let's see, we can do drills. Why not? There is also Article 4, which talks about mutual assistance in case of aggression by another state. We are developing relations with India in all areas. This also applies to the economy. It is developing at a good pace, and also in various areas. For example, in the energy sector. We are ready, by the way, to supply the Indian market with oil, but supplies have increased many times over. This applies to the possibility of supplying liquefied natural gas. We are working actively in the field of nuclear energy and are building nuclear power plants in India. Our vision of what, how and where, in what spheres and at what pace our relations should develop is based on the realities of today. The reality is that the volume of cooperation is increasing many times over. The trade turnover is not as large as with China, but it is still almost $60 billion, or 58 approximately, and it is increasing every year. In the Sahel zone, people are still tormented by various semi-terrorist or terrorist groups. There is political instability inside one side or the other. Almost everybody comes to us for help. We try to help them with pleasure, within international law. At the same time, we are not trying to squeeze anyone out. Sometimes some Europeans take offense at us, saying, you create conditions and we are being squeezed out. It has nothing to do with us. They just don't want to see you there. That's the point. In order not to create a vacuum in the security sphere, they ask us to fill this vacuum. We are trying to do our best, but only enough, but still as effectively as is required to solve this problem.